Good afternoon. My name is Mark Goodman. I represent SCORE Chicago. I'm going to go over to that. So we are SCORE Chicago. This is July 17th, and we're going to be talking about SCORE Chicago with Doug Nohe. Doug is the chapter chair of SCORE Chicago. This is a live interactive call-in TV, and especially today we're going to be talking about small business and actually the challenges of starting a small business. If you do have a question, John here is on the phone. You can give us a call at 312-738-1060 and really ask us anything about small business, the SBA, starting your own business, and whatever is pertinent to that. So as Doug, you're entering his second year as chapter chair of SCORE Chicago. So Doug, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at SCORE Chicago?
Sure. At SCORE Chicago, I'll start there as the chapter chair, actually working with the management, but also the entire organization, making sure that we're focused on the services that we provide to the community, which are the consulting services on one end for in-business or the larger in-business clients, but also the mentoring programs that we have for the individuals who are thinking of starting businesses or those that are in businesses, as well as our entire workshop program that we have, which we do about 240 workshops a year throughout the community as well.
So what specifically does the chapter chair of SCORE Chicago do?
The real answer was what everybody tells me to do. It's like being married. But realistically, what it is, it's a combination of things. One is building relationships with community leaders is one area, just making sure that the services that SCORE provides is, number one, known about with the community, but at the same time making sure that we're interacting with all the different resource partners so that we get the word out about all the different services that we do. So that's one area of what I do. But at the same time is making sure that we're looking strategically, and by strategically with this area, it is, are we providing the right services for the needs of the small business community in the greater Chicago area?
So how do you know if you're providing the right services for small business people?
Like most things, it's measure, measure, measure.
Okay.
So what we want to be able to do is to see if we have an impact on the small business community. And for our program, it's really based on the number of people we see or the interactions that we see with those individuals. And every year we do a survey of the clients that we meet with, and basically get information from them in terms of the engagement that they have with SCORE Chicago and how that has affected them in their growth of their business. And then we can do correlations between the frequency that somebody meets with us, the variety of different programs that they actually participate in, and that correlates well to those organizations that have continued to grow and succeed, and then also see the value in coming to SCORE for the different programs as well.
I think it's interesting that, if you do come to SCORE, after you come to SCORE, they essentially send you a survey,
That's
right?
Absolutely.
And they ask you, how did your session with the SCORE mentor go?
Right.
So how does SCORE Chicago rate as far as how people are rating them in this survey?
It's actually very high.
Okay.
But what we see is, again, to the correlation of frequency, that you have much higher ratings for those individuals who come more frequently. So if they've seen someone from SCORE 4, 5, 6, 10, 20 times, you get a much higher rating because obviously they are already engaged and the things that we're providing for them actually are beneficial or they wouldn't come. The person who comes one time because they just want to get some information in response to the survey, you may not get as high of a rating. And that rating would be how effective was the service that SCORE provided or the individual that they worked with provided. And if they only met with them one time, they probably didn't get a lot of information. So you would naturally see a tendency to have a lower score or rating for people who only come once as opposed to those who come multiple times and are truly engaged.
Well, let's ask you, though, to give us your Yelp or Google rating. If we had 5 stars as the top rating for SCORE Chicago,
Yep.
How many stars would
Well, before I even answer that, what I'll tell you is that one of the things we are going to be working on now is the ability for people to be able to begin to rate us.
Okay.
And we're going to be providing many more survey or engagements with our small business clients so that we can get that kind of feedback on even a much broader scale. So if I were to translate what we did today with our surveys and the information we get on a Google or a Yelp, I would say we're going to be at a 4 out of 5.
Okay,
That's
so
typically where we wind up.
So I think that's really pretty fair because you are always suspect of anybody who gets all 5-star ratings.
That's right.
And you have to realize anytime you're interacting with the public, whether you're SCORE or whether you're just your own small business, while you would like everybody to come away delighted every time, occasionally people aren't going to be delighted.
Right.
Doug and I are going to be talking a little bit about the small business community in Chicago, and he had some interesting numbers that he was going to share as far as small business starting up. But if you do have a call for us, you can give us a call. We're at 312-738-1060. So tell me about the small business community in Chicago. Sure. And what kind of trends you've been seeing over the last couple of years.
Well, I guess the most important thing, Mark, is if you look at it from a broad perspective. And that perspective is over time and over history, what has happened with small business. And normally what you see is a graph that says, if you track a person, and this has been going on now for almost 30 years, we have this trending data nationally, that what you see is what's called a success rate, how long those businesses have stayed in business. And that trend line has really stayed the same over the last 30 years. What you see is that after about 3 years of being in business, 65% of the businesses are still successful and still in business. At about 5 years, about half of those businesses continue to succeed. And at about 10-year time frame, only about 35% of those businesses are still in business.
Okay.
Now, there's many reasons for that. Everything from someone decides to retire or sell his business or whatever, and that might be considered in that data. But it's that same trend line. More importantly, what has happened over time is that it was the small business startups that outpaced the amount of businesses closing, which always continued to help grow the number of small businesses. Unfortunately, that trend has changed over the last several years. Since about 2008 now, we actually see fewer startups than the number of businesses that are failing. So what you're in essence seeing is a smaller number of small businesses every single year, which is not a good trend for us. And in fact, here locally in Chicago, if you were to just take a look at the number of business licenses that are created month to month, that has been on a sort of downward trend for the last several years as well. Now, part of that could be simply it's the people who really should be in business and are beginning to start those businesses are doing it, rather than just everybody who wants to try something goes and gets a license. So there's many reasons for that. But at the same time, it's something we ought to be cognizant of and continue to think about and help every way we can for businesses to start and to succeed.
Good. So Doug and I were talking earlier, and we'd like to propose to you guys maybe a problem, and maybe you have a comment relative to the problem. One of the things that Doug and I were talking about was the fact that sometimes we feel like that local small business doesn't particularly get the recognition
Right.
that they have. That we certainly understand that there's that service station or that car repair or that local clothing store or the bakery that's in the neighborhood. And the sense that we have is that sometimes these people are not getting the recognition relative to the kinds of services they provide, and also the recognition that these are major creators of jobs.
Right. And that last point, Mark, really is very, very important. And one of the things that everyone should recognize is that 2/3 of all jobs are created by new startup businesses. So new jobs are created by new small businesses. So that's a very important role that small business plays in the economy. Locally, really, when you talk about what is success, that is something that I think is tending to be redefined, maybe not in the best of ways. So typically what you see on the news or the ones that get the press are the new technology startup that happens to become very, very successful very, very quickly, and they have valuations that are very high. And everybody looks at that and says, wow, that's a great success. What we don't, though, do is go back to the local community, back to the businesses that you talked about, Mark, where you have individuals who have a donut shop, a repair shop, an automotive shop, and they've been there for 25 or 30 years in that community. And not only have they provided for their family, but they've also provided for 1, 2, 5 employees over that period of time. That person is unbelievably successful. And not only should we celebrate those people, we ought to ask them the questions, what have you done to be that successful for that long a time when you see the economy go up and down? And they're still there and they're still succeeding.
Well, I think there's certainly a challenge to continuity and continuing in an area. I think one of the challenges that we have when it comes to our educational process is that we have talked about the idea that people should go to college, and clearly from, as you're talking about, some of the celebrations are coming out of the quote tech world. But I think that the idea of being a local business and supplying service in a local way is important. So, let's build on that a little bit when it comes to SCORE Chicago and supporting small businesses. So how would SCORE Chicago, or how does SCORE Chicago, with all the locations all over Cook and Lake County, support these local businesses?
Sure. The one thing I would say is that SCORE is one of many resources that are available for small businesses. So if you think about the local SBDCs, the Women's Business Development Centers, the Chambers of Commerce, the Better Business Bureau, you can go on and on and on to the different organizations who are all also trying to support small business growth. The most important thing is to let people know that those services are available to them. So that's the first thing that I think we all have to do, is reach more businesses to let them know what is available. And then is making sure that the programs that we offer are the ones that match what their current needs happen to be and that will make them successful. So as an example, if you put it into two different categories of a person who is thinking about starting a business, and remember, that's the engine that continues to grow the economy, and then you also have those businesses that are in business currently. Each one has some things that are similar, but they also have variations and differences of what their needs happen to be. And we need to make sure that those people are getting those services. So for the person who's starting that business, is giving them the ability to really think about their plan. How are they going to start this business? To think out into the future of what they're going to need and give them the types of skills and information in order to be successful in that startup of that business.
So from the perspective of SCORE, you're working to give them the skills to be successful in the startup of the business. But let's go back to your 10, 15, 20 years in business scenario. What are those businesses who have been in business for 10 or 15 or 20 years doing that's allowing them to stay in business? Because I'm sure there are people who have been in local businesses and are struggling and might be saying, should I stay in this business with all of the competition that's coming at them from all the different directions? So what are some of the things that a successful small business person is doing in today's world?
The first thing I'll say is on that is that we need to ask them that question.
Okay.
And then the reason I say that is a lot of times what we do is we think about the programs that we offer, the services that we provide, in terms of the businesses that we, again, think about day in and day out. And that may not necessarily be in, some difficult neighborhoods, those that have been around for those years. So what I would say is that we need to ask those individuals, and even possibly bring them onto the show, and ask them specifically, what have they done to be successful? I don't know that I could be the person to sit here and tell them or others what those types of individuals have done to be that successful in their businesses, as opposed to maybe something a little bit different. So I encourage us to spend time more talking to them and finding out, and then making sure that we're sharing that information with others.
Well, I was telling Doug a story, and if you do have a story about a successful small business in your neighborhood that you're particularly proud of, feel free to give us a call at 312-738-1060 and tell us about a business that you think has done a particularly good job in your neighborhood. That being said, as Doug and I were talking about a business person who I ran into a couple of months ago, and this is actually a new business, but a highly skilled person. This was a gentleman who had been teaching car repair at the high school. After several years of teaching car repair at the high school, decided that he really didn't want to teach it anymore and he wanted to do it. So he went and he joined the Meineke franchise group, which is always a good option for starting your business. But one of the things he did to really personalize the business and make it valuable is he worked really hard to impress upon the community and the people who he was servicing that they should bring their car in for regular service. Not so much because if a car didn't have an oil change after 5,000 miles, it was going to fall apart. But from the point of view is if you brought your car into him every 5,000 miles and got the oil changed, he was going to do an inspection, and he was going to let you know of things that if you did the repair on the brakes today, it's going to cost you X. If you wait another 5,000 miles for your oil change or another 7,500 miles for your oil change, and you bring that car in for, quote, the oil change that you only figure you need, the cost of fixing your brakes is going to go from X to 3X. So what he has been doing, and he had a good situation because even though he was a new business, through his experience with the school, he was somewhat established in the neighborhood, and he had that credibility. So I think as a small business person, the ones that are local and the ones that are successful are the ones who, on one level, are showcasing their expertise. On a second level, are creating that local relationship.
Right.
And at the third level, I think you have to justify, why should I pay you what appears to be maybe a little bit more for that local service?
Well, remember, as a big city, as Chicago is, it really is made up of many, many diverse neighborhoods and smaller communities. And for the most part, I think people do like to spend their hard-earned money in a local community. And you see that every single day. Yes, are there big box stores? And there's lots of places that people can go, yes. But at the same time, it's the local businesses, the small businesses that really keep things moving in a neighborhood. And quite frankly, it bodes well for the neighborhood itself to be able to have small businesses. So people tend to gravitate towards local businesses. Sometimes they just need to get their message out a little bit as well.
And I think that if you have been going to a local small business and you're asking yourself, why should I keep going to this business? Why shouldn't I go to the big box store or the chain or something? One of the things that I'd encourage you to do is to go into that local business and ask them the question, why should I do business with you as opposed to X? And at least listen to the answer, because I think a lot of times, we don't even give these guys a chance.
Right.
So I think that's important.
It's really interesting, Mark, and that's a great point. One of the things, and I've been in large businesses and small businesses in my career, and one of the things about the small business is very customer service oriented. You have somebody locally that you can talk to. If you have a problem with your product or service, you know where to go to. You know who the owner is, and you can create that relationship with that person, and that adds a lot of value to a product or service that somebody has. So just going into that store or even a restaurant and you know that person locally, it helps to build that relationship, and it gives you a better experience by doing business with them.
I had a situation of I have an appliance issue, and I know I needed a part, but I wasn't sure exactly which part I needed. And I could have gone online and probably ordered it online and gotten it shipped directly to me. But I actually went into the local business who I bought it from.
Yep.
And said, help me find the part, because I knew that if they ordered the wrong part,
they take care of it.
They'd take care of it.
Yep.
As opposed to if I ordered the wrong part and it came to me over the internet, I'm having to deal with somebody hundreds of miles away who may or may not be as responsive as that local merchant's going to be. So I think that, whatever we can do to maintain and help a local merchant. But if you have a concern about your local merchant, what I would do is go in and say to them is, why should I buy from you? And if they have a good answer, buy from them. If they don't have a good answer, maybe you should go to the big box. I want to talk a little bit about SCORE and helping small business, but let's talk a little bit about volunteers. One of the things that I found out today is SCORE Chicago is actually, from the perspective of number of volunteers, the largest chapter in the United States. That being said, from a number of people we serve, we also have a lot of people who we take care of. But, what kind of people volunteer at SCORE, Doug?
Sure. It really is a cross-section of our general population. So what we actually look for is someone who can engage with a small business owner and talk their language and help them gain personal skills. So it really is not necessarily the background that they come from, because we have people who have been in executive positions in Fortune 500 companies. We have people who have been small business owners themselves. And we cross through every different industry you can think of with different skill sets and so on. So we have a very broad range of talents and skills that people bring. So the benefit of that is if you have an opportunity to meet with a mentor on a particular topic or you're working with, and there's something that you want to find an expertise, that not only can we then contact one of the people within our local chapter of 125 volunteers, but we also have access of reaching 11,000 SCORE volunteers around the country. So I'm not sure someone can find today a business that we don't have somebody that has an experience in somewhere in the country that can answer a specific question for you.
So what does SCORE Chicago offer people when it comes to volunteering? If I walk in the door and say, Doug, I'd like to be a volunteer, what can you offer me?
It really is amazing, Mark. Lately, we continue to see a greater number of people applying to be volunteers with SCORE.
And I think the point is that people used to think SCORE was like the Service Corps of retired executives, a bunch of old fogies.
Right.
And somebody observed that the last meeting, though, the average age of the SCORE mentor at the meeting was like under 50 years old.
I'm not sure if it's quite there yet, but it certainly has come down considerably. And exactly where I was going with that question as well was it's not people who are just retired anymore, although that is great because you have somebody who has more time really to give and offer. But many people who are working today but also want to be able to give back into the community because they have either been successful themselves and want to give back, or it's just something they're thinking over time they would like to do even once they may retire. So they're getting involved this early on. But for that individual, there's many things that you get as a reward to be a volunteer. One is, I can tell you just personally, in working with a small business owner and watching that light come on or solve a problem for them or give them the opportunity to succeed, and you look at that business grow and that person then hires 1 or 2 or 5 people, that sense that you get that you were somebody that assisted them to be successful is amazing personally. But it's also the camaraderie and the relationship of the other volunteers that work in this as well. In developing those relationships adds a lot to an individual's life and just being able to give back. So I would encourage anyone in any type of volunteerism that you might choose to do, if you are a person who has been involved in small business and you have a lot to be able to give back and to give to others, contact us and let us know. We'd love to talk with you.
All right, we're going to do a little bit of SCORE bookkeeping here. I want to run through some slides because we're almost done here. Okay. We have the show that we're doing now Thursdays at 5:30. Check out some things on Small Business Week at the beginning of October. Just very briefly, relative to the Elevator Pitch Plus contest, we have sat down. We know who the 7 semifinalists are. It will be announced tomorrow, so if you submitted your video and you're interested in who the Snip Pitch winners are, you can check it out tomorrow at www.snippitch.com. You can also check out the submissions from over 100 other people. Once again, as we talked about, SCORE offers counseling mentoring. workshops and training, management consulting. You can check us out on social media, Twitter at Score Chicago, YouTube Score Chicago Video, our website at www.scorechicago.org. Our phone number, our email is email@scorechicago.org. Give us a call at 312-353-7724. So whether you need help with your business or you'd like to give back to the community, we're seeing more people at all stages in their life giving back to the community. You can drop us a note, email at scorechicago.org. Give us a call, 312-353-7724. I wanted to thank Doug for being my guest. Next week, we are probably going to be starting our contestants, so have some fun, go to Snip Pitch, and we'll see you next week.